Now, I just want to preface this by saying these are just estimates. In terms of all box office, we're not actually going to have legitimate actual numbers until tomorrow afternoon. That being said, I don't necessarily think any of this is actually going to be, I guess, even more so different than what it actually is. Usually the industry estimates and everything aren't necessarily very much off. But basically today I want to talk about just this particular weekend and why exactly Ghost in the Shell failed. Obviously, there's a lot of different things to talk about here, so we're just going to dissect everything piece by piece by piece. Like I always say, guys, please make sure to go check out Box Office Mojo, boxoffice.com, the numbers, or Variety, or any other like Hollywood Reporter. They always have like up to date brand new information, discussions like these, and they have really good breakdowns of all this stuff. But personally, I just want to kind of go over this myself, having actually gone to see Ghost in the Shell this weekend and actually really liking it. I thought it was a lot better than a lot of people even thought of me. I feel like it's gotten a lot of criticism that just does not deserve for the most part. But right now we're looking at Ghost in the Shell opening in third place in the domestic box office with about $19 million. And then basically probably bringing in around $40 million internationally to about $59 million for its opening weekend. And while you might think that sounds like a lot for a budgeted film of about $110 million, not to mention an extensive marketing campaign such as this, it's really not where it needs to be. Internationally, like I said, around 40 million, a little bit more so than 40 million, about 50 international markets, highest being Russia with a second place finish of $5.3 million. And then, you have South Korea, France, the UK, Germany, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, Spain, Hong Kong, and luckily enough for this particular film, we still have openings in Japan and China to probably make more of the money in, and we're not really going to see exactly how successful this movie is going to be until it opens in those markets, because like Japan is like the home country for this particular franchise, for this particular story, so hopefully that they will embrace it, and the whole whitewashing controversy that I'll talk about in a minute didn't necessarily turn them off as much as it personally probably turned off a lot of people in the States. I have my own thoughts and opinions about that. I'll probably get into that in a little bit. But personally, the one thing I think really kind of hurt this film that a lot of people aren't necessarily talking about is the fact that it was rated PG-13. And that's not to say that PG-13 movies are bad or kind of detrimental to these particular type of films, but it has been really interesting to see how R-rated or hard R-rated films in this particular action-based genre have been overperforming as of late. The biggest example right here with Scarlett Johansson would be her last, star outing with Lucy back in 2015, I believe, maybe 2014. No, yeah, 2014. I'm sorry. Lucy actually opened up to about $43 million domestically, and then actually it kind of petered out about $126 million, and then eventually went on to make about $463 million worldwide. Now, to anyone doing basically the math, you had about maybe a little less than a third of that actually coming in domestically, and about, I guess, 2/3 or a little bit more than 2/3 coming in foreignly with $336 million. Huge opening and huge final numbers for a movie that basically cost $40 million to make, and didn't necessarily have the biggest of marketing campaigns. That's not just to say that that's the only one that is comparable here. We've had recent huge successes, even this year, if not earlier than last year. We had Deadpool, we've had the John Wick and John Wick sequel, both hard R films, basically playing to a particular market. And we've had, earlier this month, we had Logan. And all those films really overperformed in terms of their budget, in terms of whatever anyone actually really expected. And it's really interesting to see that maybe for movies like this, these, adult-oriented action films, we're seeing a little bit more of a push to, we want actually hard R films. And personally, the cool thing that I think about there is that it became such a controversy and such a huge selling point, at least for the Expendables movies, that's been in the because Sylvester Stallone has stepped away from that particular franchise recently, it's been more so in the news, and we'll probably see a fourth film somewhere down the line with that, considering the Chinese budget or Chinese money that it has been flowing in and all this but that's not necessarily the video here. It does seem, at least when you look at these particular numbers just right on their face, that maybe the PG-13 family-friendly-esque, or, at least teen-friendly outings are not necessarily what the adult audience wants. And interestingly enough, even though they were trying to sell it for that particular market, Ghost in the Shell, just from the way it played out, it seemed like it was really supposed to be for the adults, and that's one thing I really liked for it. I don't think the PG-13 rating actually hurt it. I don't feel like a lot of people would feel the same way. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Like I said, I didn't think it hurt it. I think that it was still really an entertaining film. I don't think it really lost any of the texture from the original. But it actually is really interesting when you look at this, considering the fact that we are seeing more and more films that are hard R ratings actually perform in the box office. Maybe, in terms of marketing, in terms of what the general audience wants, considering you're seeing somewhat of a shift from the general audience in the US wanting to get away from kind of more family-friendly and less gruesome or less kind of realistic violence in PG-13 films, and wanting to embrace that of the hard R action film, which, would be kind of a cyclical, because we saw a lot of this stuff in the 90s and the 80s, and maybe we're starting to see a little bit more of a shift towards that as, people of the millennial generation basically growing up and remembering the action films they watched as kids and wanting to basically re-experience that instead of having to basically watch all these big PG-13 movies. Because like anyone really, I guess what anyone would really think is the fact that we have basically this connection with what we remember as kids, nostalgia basically driving entertainment for a large part of the audience, at least for our audience. And maybe, considering the fact that we are actually a little bit more so adult than we were as kids, we actually want to see, or we want films being made that pander to that particular audience style. We don't want the kids of today dictating what we should watch and what we shouldn't watch, or what we should see on screen and what we shouldn't see. So honestly, the coolest thing about this is we have Atomic Blonde, which is a hard R film with Charlize Theron, opening up I think later next month, honestly, and it has some really huge hype around it, and honestly, it's going to be really interesting to see how that particular film, kind of the female John Wick, if you will, performs as compared to this film. And I think one thing we're going to see from this is they're going to start understanding that they maybe messed up when it came to the rating system and how they basically portrayed this world. But personally, I don't think that that's the only thing wrong with this film, and I think we're going to kind of get into a little more things. One of the things that we're seeing here, and one of the biggest difference when going back to Lucy, is that Lucy's audience, at least for the opening weekend, was about 50% female. Not the same with Ghost in the Shell. One thing they're reporting right now is that about 61% were male and 39% were female. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. Honestly, I think Beauty and the Beast has really eaten up the female market of people who might be interested in this. And honestly, one thing we have to accept really is that females generally make up a good portion of the audience when it comes to action films and horror movies. Not something you would really think about, but it's actually very true. They do lead the box office for like most movies, so it's interesting to think of it that way. So maybe we're seeing one of the reasons that this basically underperformed is that, Beauty and the Beast is still very much performing, and it could possibly be one of the reasons that this film underperformed it, just because it has to compete with the juggernaut, which is Beauty and the Beast. But I'm not necessarily sure that is the exact reason. But in terms of also the male audience might be also a little bit exhausted after this particular month or these last couple weeks, because we've had Power Rangers, Logan, Get Out, and Kong Skull Island. It's been really very heavy in terms of a month. No film in this particular month of March opened with like one film, new film in each week opened with 40 million or more, and that is really crazy. It's not something we see ever in any March month So it's just been a really crazy month. We are currently on pace to be the record-breaking year after 2016 record-breaking year. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that pans out. But that could be one of the reasons. We could just be completely tired of this stuff with markets in terms of gender or age groups basically being split based on ratings or other movies in the marketplace. Another thing that a lot of people are going to be talking about is the whitewashing controversy that's been really plaguing Ghost in the Shell basically from the beginning, ever since Scarlett Johansson was actually cast. Personally, I don't necessarily agree with that, so you can go into the comment section below and you can disagree with me all you want about how much this was actually just a travesty and they completely shit on the legacy of this series and everything. But when you have the series creator talking about how ridiculous the whitewashing controversy is and the fact that her character is a robot that they created in order to put her shell in, or her ghost in the shell, or her brain, or yada whatever, her consciousness, I don't necessarily think that this is something that would be so much of a controversy. I feel like it was just an easy target for people because it's a Japanese property that we can take and yell that the Japanese protagonist, at least in the original, is not a Japanese protagonist in the American-made version of it. Personally, I feel like there are certain things in this movie that do indicate like some aggressive whitewashing, but when it comes to Scarlett Johansson's character in particular, I really don't see the issue there. I don't necessarily see all the animosity, especially when there's so many other movies coming out or such movies already out in the marketplace where you need to be kind of focusing your attention. But maybe because this was particularly the movie coming out, the very next movie coming out, and the very next big budget movie coming out that showcased this kind of animosity that's been growing over the last couple of years. I understand it. I get it. I feel like the people who are mad about this, and feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like the people who are mad about this, I feel like your anger is a little bit misplaced on this particular property. Not so much that the argument is bad, not so much that you just need to shut up or anything. I feel like this particular project. So yeah, I do feel like that controversy, since it's been plaguing it ever since even the production of this film, that probably had a lot to do with it. Another thing I feel like happened with this film is that I don't know why, this is just me personally, I don't necessarily know why you can't get anime fans to support anime movies. Maybe it goes a little bit beyond that. Maybe it's a little bit more complex than that. It's not necessarily superhero films where a lot of people sit around and go, well, I don't necessarily read comic books, but I do know who Batman is, and I do know who Superman is, and, I've heard about Iron Man or Spider-Man or something like that. Maybe it's a little bit different than that because a lot of people probably haven't heard of Ghost in the Shell. They have no idea that even is a Japanese product or anything like that. So maybe that's one of the reasons, but I feel like there is a big enough, or there should be a big enough market for the anime community where we should actually be supporting the content that we love and that we want to see, because as much as we don't want them to make bad movies, if they make movies that make money, more people are going to take more studios are going to take chances on all of this stuff. And when they get to the point where they're actually taking chances on this stuff, you're going to start seeing really, really good products, the same way that we did with superhero movies that basically took over our entertainment industry, movies, comic books, television shows over the last decade and a half. And I really feel like anime definitely has those stories that can continually make like multiple films. I feel like they have amazing epic stories that the entire general audience would like, but we need a group of people, or at least a substantial portion of the general audience, to at least acknowledge the fact that these stories are good or worth taking chances on it. Because as much as I love this movie, if it doesn't make money, they're never going to keep making these movies because there's no audience for them. So as long as you like that stuff, I feel like you really should support it, regardless of whether you think it's going to be bad or good. Give it a chance. But yeah, guys, that's basically all I really have to say about this particular movie, honestly. There's probably more reasons why this movie didn't necessarily succeed in the box office right now. Obviously, I don't really want to go into everything. I feel like I've already talked about this personally enough. I really liked it. If you haven't seen it, I implore you to go watch it. It's a really fun movie for the most part. The 3D is amazing. Look, I have eye problems. I've never seen 3D. This is the very first time I've ever seen 3D sitting in a movie theater, and it scared the hell out of me. Honestly, it scared. I didn't know what to expect. And guys, if that's what y'all hate, going into a theater, I thought it was just spectacular. So really awesome 3D. If it can make me see 3D where I have eye problems, it's very, very difficult for me to. Very good. And honestly, guys, just, share your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Did I miss anything in terms of why this movie actually didn't succeed at the box office? There's a lot of reasons why this movie probably underperformed, but at the same time, there's a lot of reasons why it should have done well too, honestly. So just share all your opinions, all your thoughts. If you disagree with me when it comes to the whitewashing thing, I completely understand. Share that as well. But I do feel like I have a point as well, and I hope that you would take that and just kind of think about your thoughts and then mine, and then come back with a thoughtful response. If you just come back with something complaining or something derogatory or something, that doesn't solve any issues. So guys, please make sure to rate, comment, subscribe, share this video out to your friends if you enjoyed the video, and I'm going to catch you on the next Real Numbers video. Bye.